Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. I have a different type of episode for you today. A short I was approached by David Patrick regarding a show on blue chip players. And as I understand it, David, this comes from a theory presented by Bucky Brooks some time ago.
Yeah, Bucky Brooks from Move the Chains podcast. He was a scout before he was a contributor for the NFL.com. And he just always kind of talked about with every team, do you have enough blue chip, quote unquote, talent to field a team to win a Super Bowl? And I've always thought about that as I follow the Ravens draft and through the preseason. Does EDC give us enough players to potentially win a Super Bowl?
All right. And so a lot of the way the Ravens run the organization, of course, is cap related. So how does Brooks define a blue chip player?
He doesn't actually. It sounds more like expert opinion, where he'll give opinion pieces on different teams, like he did a series last year, where he just lists the players and talks about what's exceptional to him. So I think that gives us a little bit of room to play with here, where you can look at pro balls historically, but I think it's more about eyeball test, elite traits, or top 10 stats that you've seen previously, or you think that player is going to realize during the season.
Okay, fair enough. Let's start with that definition and work from there. One of the points I wanted to make about the relativization of players is that a young player on his rookie deal who's playing at a star level is obviously a lot more valuable than an older player playing at a star level. And a team obviously is going to have to draft very well and fairly quickly develop these blue chip players out of their draft.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the best example of that in our history is Joe Flacco. He was on his rookie contract, so he's not taking up a huge piece of our salary cap pie. And he played Joe Montana level for that 2012 Super Bowl season, and it allowed the team to have at least 11 blue chip players to really round out their roster.
That's really the double whammy there, is that by having Flacco on the contract he had, you really had room for a couple of more blue chip players that at other positions. So so you're paying some of the later years of Ed Reed and Ray Lewis's career, where you're paying full market value for the players, but you can afford to do it because you still have a quarterback on the first contract.
Yeah, and when I was reviewing this, Ken, I really keep coming back to, yes, you need 11 blue chip players, but the most important position is quarterback. So if your quarterback is not blue chip, especially in the playoffs, which is what I would argue Flacco was in 2012, he just reached a historic height. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it matters if you have 11 players. So there's an asterisk on that when it comes to Lamar Jackson for this coming season, because he has not, in my opinion, proved that when he's playing the best team, who's only focused on him in the fourth quarter, can he put 4 wins together? Because I think it's unlikely we're going to get that first round bye.
All right, so let's go back to the definitional component of this, because you talked about Bucky Brooks a little bit, and that he hadn't really put a definition that you could sink your teeth into on this. What would be your definition of it?
So I think that the only objective that I can really go to is, were you or are you a pro ball player? Then it's kind of an eye test for me, because I'm a casual fan. Do you look like you're a world beater? Are you a top 10 player? When I watch the games, are you just beating everybody? Or are you ascending to that level like Hamilton last year, where by the end of the season, you can just tell he just stands out every time you watch him play? And then the last thing is, if you go into stats, can you find something in their athletic profile, like a RAS score or a top 15 talent? Or do you put up some sort of stats where you're like, that looks like a top 10 player at his position?
Okay. All right. Well, fair enough. I like always cheap guys who contribute, but that's okay. We'll get into that as you go along. So let's take a look maybe at who do you want to look at? Do you want to look at an old Ravens team first to say how they did? Okay, let's do that then.
Yeah, let's look at 2012. And so this is kind of in order of importance to me. Actually, I do think it's Ray Lewis, for sure, blue chip player. I mean, he talked about it. The team talked about it. I think he got some playoff caliber blue chip performances out of people by telling him it was his last ride. So Ray, Ed, Suggs, I think those are unquestionable. Ken, I've heard you talk about Matt Burke being one of the top centers in the league.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you looked at PFF, Ray Rice, pro ball player. I mean, wasn't that the year the Ray diddle up the middle against the Chargers?
Ray had not a great
Rice.
year in 2012, is my recollection.
Okay.
Yeah. It was the 4th and 29 play to Rice.
And he did make a Pro Bowl that year.
Okay. Let me look at what he did that year, because I'm forgetting which year he really fell apart. Maybe it was 13. He dropped way off. But I have to look at it again. Yeah, he had 4.4 yards per carry. He was down a little bit, but he also had 61 receptions. So while his yardage overall was certainly off from the high of 2000 and 2011 to 1,621 the next year from scrimmage, and his touchdowns were down, whatnot, he still did make a Pro Bowl. So we still certainly consider Ray Rice a cornerstone player at that point. They certainly gave him cornerstone money starting in 2013.
Yeah, they did. And please question anyone on this list, because I think for the most part, this is a little bit subjective. But I think Kelechi Osemele was one of those first contract. I think he was a rookie. Mm-hmm. And come playoff time, I think he just exploded with his ability. I thought he played really, really well.
Yeah, I agree that they made a 3-player switcheroo there to basically move Osemele from right tackle to left guard, move Orr to right tackle, and McKinney in at left tackle, which improved 2 positions. And that was big. Osemele was probably the biggest single improvement there. He was great, and he's a great bargain, and he's undoubtedly the best of those 3 players I just named in terms of what he was producing relative to what they were paying him. No doubt about it. But if we're really talking about talent relative to payment, I mean, 2012 was a lost season for Ray Lewis in most ways. He didn't have a good year when he was out there. And in fact, in the playoffs, he really didn't play very well, despite the fact he made a lot of tackles. He was, wearing a huge arm brace the whole time and dropped interception, but he had a ton of tackles. And he did some great things on the goal line against San Francisco I'm never going to forget. But I don't know that I could call him a cornerstone player anymore. I don't know that I'd call him a blue chip player. So you'd have to go to it and really say that he inspired the team some way, or he led the team in some way to get there.
And I think that's where I'm at. And then you throw on the 4th and goal, really the goal line stand at the end, that won the game. And I don't know if he made that effort to come all the way back and then play hurt. I mean, I remember stories even talking about the week leading up to the Super Bowl. He's still hanging his arm up in his hotel room trying to get the blood flow out of there to make it heal. But I think without him, I don't know if he's going to make the checks to make other players have their great performances in the Super Bowl. But I acknowledge that his overall statistical play wasn't probably as good as before.
Yeah, a lot of coverage issues in that Super Bowl, but unbelievable positioning on those final 3 plays to be in exactly the right place. There's a clear out route on, I forget if it's 2nd and 5 or 3rd and 5. I actually forget which play it is, but they ran a complex route where they ran basically multiple routes through an area to try and drag every defender out of there. So Frank Gore could drift into the area for the pass. Ray Lewis knew exactly what was going on. He went to the spot. Kaepernick didn't look to Gore, went to Crabtree instead. Jimmy Smith basically took his head off on that play, and then the Ravens were finally able to get it to 4th down and finish him off.
Yeah, and if I'm going to talk more about Ray Lewis and his inspirational ability to galvanize the team for a Super Bowl, I think it really started in Foxborough in 2011 season when they lost that playoff game. I listened to his speech over and over again, inspiring the team that everybody loses, and it's what you do with it next year. Because I was in Foxborough. I thought we won.
Yeah, I thought we won too. So you on Evans' catch, you thought it was a catch. I was jumping up and down. We're going to the Super Bowl, and Maureen had to slow me down and say, "Wait a minute, no, he dropped the ball."
Yeah, I didn't even see it. I turned around and let all the Foxborough fans know what I thought, and they just pointed around and said, your guy dropped the ball. I couldn't even see that kind of missed the field goal. I was confused. Yeah, it was terrible. But I think Ray Lewis really let him know. Yeah, there's next year. Let's do it. So, yeah, but I agree. We can leave him off the list for sure. And I still
whip
think
through
that
the
there's
rest of these
12.
players here. We got to kind of pick it up here
Yeah,
a little bit.
let's pick it up. So,
Yeah.
Haloti Ngata, Pro Bowler,
Sure.
Joe Flacco, we kind of talked about. I think Anquan Bolden meets my kind of postseason blue chip performer, where when you need a play, he makes it. I think we ran the same play in the red zone on multiple games because we had that new OC in Caldwell, sticks, and then in fourth quarter, I think there was a long third down, and Bolden was covered and still made the play.
Yeah, that was the 3rd and 1 play where Flacco checked out of it at the line of scrimmage and threw it to Bolden in single coverage. That was Sims calling it in real time. Says, "I can't believe he's checking out of this, but he's going to pass the ball." And Jacoby Jones certainly had a great postseason, no doubt about it. And he was a good return man. I don't know if I'd call him a blue chip player. He's just his impact on the game is
only as a kick returner and punt returner. So I'm a Harbaugh enthusiast. So I extend my blue chippers to cheap seats where it's kickers, punters, kick returners could be blue chip players. And he had a play in the Super Bowl that really stood out. And in the Denver game too, in that postseason.
Yeah. Oh, really? I can't remember a play from that Denver game where he was involved.
Oh, did he make the mile high?
He did.
You're being facetious. I'm so sorry. That's hilarious.
You didn't pick up. We're looking at each other here. You're supposed to be able to pick up on my facial gestures there.
I'm going to start looking at you, Ken. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. Yeah, and then there are a couple others that, Vontae Leach, Bryant McKinney, Justin Tucker, maybe.
All right. So to my way of thinking, you're on the margin with a lot of players who I would definitely not call blue chip players. And much as I like Vontae Leach, if Vontae Leach is a blue chip player, then Patrick Ricard is.
Oh, I agree.
Okay.
Is he top 10 at his position? Does he dominate when you watch him do what he needs to do?
Okay. All right. Well, then we can look at this. But Marshall Yanda you have, and Ben Grubbs was gone at this point. Yep. Matt Burke I would certainly agree with. And Terrell Suggs. Well, Terrell Suggs I would not agree with for 2012. He was hurt most of the year and did not play well. He had 2 sacks all year.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, Darius Webb was a blue chip player until he tore his ACL.
Oh yeah, he was the best corner in the league. And that Dallas game was a disaster for the Ravens. Ray Lewis and Webb went down. What I'm going to say about the 2012 team, and this is going to be a little bit of a contrarian perspective. And I don't beat on the guest, but I would say that I sometimes like to softly challenge here. Please. I would say without question, the 2012 Ravens team was the worst of the first 5 Harbaugh years. And that included a 9-7 team in 2009 that had an unbelievably great offensive line and still a great defense. To me, it was certainly thoroughly miraculous that they won the Super Bowl that year as opposed to the others. And if you're looking at what kind of a playoff share do you have? If you could go with a definition of that you go into the playoffs and you have a 25% chance to win it, or maybe you have a 35% chance like in 2006 or in 2019 where they didn't get it either year. If you look at the share of a Super Bowl that you have for those 5 years, they probably had 1.1 or 1.2 Super Bowl shares for those 5 years combined. But that 2012 team had the lowest percentage one. They probably had about a 0.12 or something Super Bowl share that year. So it was an incredible ride, but it's not something that I'd want to try and repeat as a formula. The only thing I think it's worth looking at in terms of formula is that it's worth making the playoffs every year to try and have a chance to win it.
Totally agree with that. And I think that probably was the worst team in that run, except for the asterisk, which is we're a quarterback-driven league. And so I think the year before, Flacco played well enough to win, and the Ravens said, look, we need someone better who can catch it when it matters the most. And that's where I think Anquan Bolden really matters. I think that quarterbacks, a wide receiver who can make the play in the fourth quarter, and maybe a pass rusher who can end the game in the fourth quarter are probably the most important of the blue chip players.
All right. Well, let's move on and compare that to the 23 Ravens, because I think that's what we're really trying to do in terms of seeing is this team ready to win right now?
Yeah. So if I can, Ken, I'd like to just list first the guys where I think unquestioned are probably going to be blue chip players. And why don't you tell me if you think, no, that's kind of out of left field if you challenge any of them to start, if that's okay.
Sure.
So number 1, Roquan Smith.
Absolutely.
Mark Andrews.
Yep, absolutely. And they're paying him too. Yep.
That's true. Marlon Humphrey.
Absolutely.
Ronnie Stanley.
Yes, and he's a guy who there is a risk of him not performing at that level, but yes, absolutely,
Totally agree with that. Marcus Williams.
absolutely, paying him too. So far, 5 guys we're paying tremendous money to.
This is true. Justin Tucker. The Ravens do a
Absolutely.
good job. If you're doing great, they're going to pay you. And then to me, a little bit of the asterisk is Lamar Jackson.
It's
I
more.
love him.
Hopefully, it's more
Love
like
him.
this is the Matt Judon thing. It's
Yeah.
more like if they pay you, you are great, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to pay you if you're great.
Yeah.
It's if they are paying you, you are great. So that's
Yes.
what's good about them is they haven't really missed on a lot of big contracts.
Yeah. And really, their misses have been injury related, I think, for the most part.
Yeah.
They pay a guy and then he can't play or he doesn't come back. And
Yeah.
so I think what you said, though, applies to a lot of the guys that might become blue chip players this year, and that if they realize their potential, they're gone after this season.
There's some of that.
Some of that.
So who else we got on this list? You give me 6, and it's 6 of the biggest contracts on the team, and then
The last is
Lamar.
The last is Tucker. Then Lamar Jackson. Yeah. So I think that's 7 solid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's the 7. The team's 7, highest paid players probably.
Probably.
So who else are you going to include in this group to get us up to 11?
Right. So I think that the most likely guys that I would include are Kyle Hamilton.
Yep.
And to me, I put a little asterisk because I know at nickel, he's a blue chip player.
Mm-hmm.
At strong safety, I hope he's a blue chip player. And looking at some of the moves this offseason when we lost Clark, what were the Ravens doing? They were flirting with guys like Amos to come in. Does that mean they want to maximize Hamilton at nickel? Or do they want the flexibility to move him down to nickel some of the time? That I don't know.
There could be another answer to this, and I haven't really delved into this on another pods. This is worth just taking a moment to discuss right now. I think they're going to start with Hamilton now at strong safety based on the depth of the team everywhere. And part of the thing is that he's got to be the first decision is where you play him and has the best chance to be a superstar. But the more I think about it, it's a reversible. It's as reversible as a vasectomy, at least. They may lose some ball games here in the early part of the season if they have Hamilton at strong safety and they don't like it, but they can reverse it because the talent is not so great at slot corner that it's going to tell them, you can't replace me right now. At least I don't believe that's the case. And if they moved Hamilton back to slot corner, then you have Geno Stone on the back end again, and I think that then that's a very viable, workable solution. But I agree, you make a very good point there that Hamilton is a cornerstone player or a blue chip player at nickel, and I completely agree with that. And they're just trying to find is there a guy who's even another level of superstar if they move him somewhere else, and it might work out. And if it doesn't, it can be reversed.
Yeah. Completely agree. I think that's also why Geno Stone got paid. That's an insurance policy.
Wait, did Geno Stone get paid today?
No. Didn't he get a 1-year extension?
Oh, you may know something I don't, so I'm going to look it up right now. If he did get a 1-year extension, I'm excited about it. I'm not talking about a 1-year deal for this year or a 1-year extension.
Oh, sorry, for this year. I thought that he got paid for this year, and maybe I'm wrong. I thought that he was brought back with some sort of 1-year contract for this year.
Yeah, he has, from what I can see here, he does have void years, and this is new. If this may have happened in the last couple of days, and I wasn't really aware of this, but he has $750,000 in bonus, of which $600,000 is paid in 4 void years. So he's making $1,760,000 this year. That's more than I thought, and so this might have happened in the last few days. Do you know when this happened?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I thought it happened earlier in the offseason where they said, we're investing in you. And I went, oh, okay. Does that mean Hamilton's playing nickel? Or is this a backup in case Hamilton doesn't work out? Or just a depth piece? Because, he filled in for Marcus Williams last year pretty well.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, I understand that. At least at this amount of money, this doesn't mean he's out of Baltimore necessarily after 23, but this is a 5th void year contract that I wasn't aware of, and they're going to have to find a way to re-sign him if they like what he does this year.
Ken, I wanted to ask you real quick if I could. These void years, if a player plays well, is it advantageous to the team to sign them to some sort of restructure where they can wipe out some of that void year and pay them if they play well this year?
I am not the guy to ask that kind of question to, because I don't know all the ins and outs of the cap, and specifically since the Ravens have never used void years before, I'm particularly ignorant there.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to say something that's wrong. Brian McFarland or Dan Reese are good guys to go to on Twitter to ask that kind of question to. But it's certainly possible that it's restructurable. But let me think about this here. Yeah, I think 600,000 of that prorated bonus has not yet been paid. So it may be that 600,000 of that could be somehow moved around and paid differently in the coming years. Of course, the player would have to agree to it, and I think the player would have to play at a higher level. In Stone's case, I think the Ravens may be hoping that they could get him on a series of rolling 2-year contracts, but he may well outplay something like that if he gets significant playing time this year.
Right on. Next guy who I think is probably highest on the list is kind of an injury question now. Unfortunately, he has appeared on the PUP list with some sort of vague knee injury, and that's Tyus Bowser.
Yep.
I think that he's a complete linebacker. He can cover. He can rush. Yeah, he can play the run. He's irreplaceable, really.
Yeah, he's enormously valuable to the Ravens' flexibility and their pass rushers. We've talked about on this show a lot. His ability to drop to cover and how often he's done it was a complete staple of Wink's ability to rush. They used it actually a little bit less as a percentage of snaps. I think he was down from 39 to 25 last year. And so that's maybe a little bit more of a typical 4-man straight ahead rush used by McDonald. But his ability to drop means you can rush somebody off the slot, you can rush a linebacker, you can rush a safety if you want to. It's a big part of the Ravens things. Unfortunately, I'd have to take him off this list based on where he is with the knee injury right now. And I don't know if you saw, but there was some video of him walking into camp that was posted by Kyle Barber today that did not look good.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a shame. Well, maybe he can make a playoff run. Fair enough. Next guy I think that is highest on my list is actually Patrick Queen.
Okay, certainly a valuable player. Played very well with Roquan last year. You could certainly make a case he's a blue chip player. He's not a guy I think that the Ravens are going to end up paying, but that doesn't mean he can't be a blue chip player because the Ravens are pretty much, the cupboard is full of contracts that they can hand out. So
I think if Queen made a few of those easy picks in the beginning of the year, just statistically speaking, looking at all the interceptions he made, but then the eyeball, if you look at some of the plays, the interceptions he made against Burrow late in the year, I mean, that was phenomenal. That drift back where he tricked Kenny, can I pick it against the Steelers? I mean, great plays. He can blitz. And I think that when I look at Roquan coming over, and Roquan admittedly said he kind of didn't know the playbook that well, why did he jump so big in a system he didn't know that well? He went to an all-pro level and made our defense top 3.
Yeah.
It seems like Roquan is implicating that Queen is just an exceptional talent to run with. And I think that when Queen said that he was a little upset about Trenton Simpson, who I think is actually maybe a replacement for Bowser one day, just by body build and type and coverage ability, it seems like Eric DeCosta said, hey, we might want you here. We might extend you. So I look at that as a really clear sign that my eyeball test is right in the second half of the season, that Queen might be a blue chip player and really, really earn himself a big contract, potentially somewhere else, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some big positives from that. I think he was playing a little bit better before Roquan arrived. Then Roquan arrived, and he took another leap forward. There was another coincident thing that happened with Roquan arriving, because that's exactly when Tyus Bowser came back.
That's so true.
And he was a big lift to the defense as well. But Roquan never had played as well in Chicago, much more inconsistent player during his first few years. And all of a sudden, he's a much better player. And the roles are much more natural for the two, give Queen many more plays where he's the trail player. is just much more natural to him. I think also he keyed off Roquan. Roquan is a little better at finding the football and keeping track of it. And Roquan and he developed a symbiotic relationship in terms of their ability to be up at the line of scrimmage and drop and allow another guy to blitz, or at least not let the other team know the one that was coming was at the line of scrimmage. And that became very, very potent for the Ravens in terms of their pass rush down the stretch.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to look forward to. Those are the two players I'm going to be watching the most this year when the ball is snapped on defense.
All right, so I know we have some more blue chippers to identify here still.
Yeah, so Odell Beckham Jr. is really high on my list because I look at that Rams Super Bowl and that ramp up that he did, and he was on his way to Super Bowl MVP in my opinion. And when I think about what was said about when he was signed by the Rams after his 2020, his first knee surgery for his ACL, and that the Rams team doctor came down and said, "We need to do surgery." And he said, "To hell with that, I'm playing." And he said, "Okay. Now, if you have an ACL where you have a failed graft," and I'm not an orthopedist, but if you have a failed graft, or if you have a stretched out ligament, or on your imaging it doesn't look good, maybe 10 to 20% of people can still do athletics without that, because they just have such great athleticism, muscle, all those other things that allow them to still play. But if you put it at a dynamic position like receiver, where you're putting all of that force on your knee, your stability will really shake. And I think that he ramped up in the playoffs and said, "To hell with it, I'm going for it." And it took him as far as the first half. And so I don't know that he was ever truly healthy. I don't know if that surgery ever, from the surgical perspective or the physical therapy perspective, the training perspective, it's been documented that he didn't return as quickly as the Browns wanted. So something was off. And so now he had the same surgery because his other knee was healthy to do that harvest for a patellar implant, which is the gold standard of making that ACL really strong. And all the reports are that it's there, it's healthy. He's had 18 months to recover. I think he's going to be a really explosive athlete who, at minimum, we ramp up and can get a really great December, January, and hopefully February out of him. I'm really high on Odell.
Okay, let me just say that's probably the most reasoned argument I've heard that Beckham might return to some of his former playing status that I've heard. And it's good to hear it coming from somebody who has a medical background or whatnot. So I appreciate that. I still have to look at his age and the fact that he hasn't really played during this last year, even if we think his athleticism is back, and say there's just too many damn counterexamples to it for me to buy into it. But that said, I think he had a great postseason in 2021 and didn't play in 22. Even if you were his doctor and you told me everything was fine, he's good to go, I still don't know that I'd bet on him. And so I think it's a good thing for the Ravens if he's not their top receiver. Unfortunately, right now with Bateman's situation, I think he's going to have an increased role, and I'm really not happy about that. But anyway, it is what it is. And if you think Odell's a blue chipper, that's fine. He'd be off my list.
Fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see some other guys. I think the last guy. No, that's my 11 of most likely. A few other guys that I'm personally very high on are a long shot, admittedly, but it's David Ojabo.
Yeah, not too much of a long shot. I like him as a chance. I'd say if you really want an impact player, a guy who's going to do some outrageous things, Ojabo might be a better bet than Beckham.
I agree. I mean, the main issue is just really his fastball pitch is his speed rush. Mm-hmm. And so is his Achilles all the way back? It sounds like, based on reports, feels that way when you hear Ojabo when he's talking to the crowd or he's talking to reporters. He's like, "I don't even want to talk about this. I'm ready to go." But I think that you combine him with his fastball intact with Dr. Rush, giving him an actual spin move, that excites me. That's where I think that we might realize a guy on a rookie contract who could explode for 10 sacks. And so I'm really looking at him.
He has got extremely violent hands, and he does a lot of other things well as a pass rusher, but he needs that get off to be what he is. What I hear about Ajabo is that he's already got some ability with compound moves. So whether it's a Euro step or a spin move or any number of other moves that involve, showing something to that tackle and then making another move to as the second part of that and timing it well. Those are the things that Chuck Smith should be able to work with him and do very well. And I'm very bullish on Ajabo this year. You don't have Odafe Oweh on here, and he'd be on my list.
I think I'm just exhausted. I think I pushed him so hard to my friends last year, and it just didn't really come. And he's got a much higher RAS than Ajabo. I mean, Ojabo's like 9.39, and I think Odafe is like 9.9 or something like that. But when I watch him, there's just some sort of flow to his game that I don't see that I do see in Ajabo, because Ajabo not only has that speed and those violent hands, but he has natural bend. He can really bend under the tackle and complete that move. And Odafe, maybe it's just opportunity. They underused him last year, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on why he might be your blue chip.
Well, start with the fact that he was used improperly last year. Used too much and at the wrong position. And playing a lot of Sam where they didn't really have anybody else before Bowser returned. And then they moved him back. They cut down his snaps per game, and he was back to rushing very effectively at the end of the season. What I think that I want to see worked on this offseason more than anything is Oweh work on his get off. He's got to get out of his stance and get up in into that tackle as quickly as possible. And he's a better athlete than any left tackle that's ever played the game. Let me just say that. It's really quite simple. And in so doing, in his first move should absolutely cause overreaction from that tackle. And if it doesn't, it's probably something about his get off is still being too slow. And he's allowing that tackle to get set up in exactly the way he wants to first, or even worse, making that first contact that throws off Oweh's timing, which you can't have. So, I want to see Oweh get off the ball quicker. I know they had these driver's ed test machines when I took driver's ed in this was about 1979, so it was a long time ago. So where they would time how long it would take you to press the pedal after you saw a light. It was trying to teach you that you needed to stop a long time before you kind of had to anticipate the light, look for the stale green, and that you didn't really have time to stop when you just saw yellow late and that kind of thing. But it was basically timing yourself on how long it would take. And you could get better at that by practicing. And I've got to believe there's a way they can train athletes to have a faster get off.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure. And if there's anyone who can do it, who has the clay to be molded, it's him. But I'm just now, after 2 seasons, plus when I look at 0 sacks in college, or did he have a sack in college?
0 sacks in his final year. Final year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe something's missing. I mean, right now he's looking like a really great Courtney Upshaw, and I want a lot.
Oh man! Oh, that is such an under evaluation. Oh my God! Boy, he would not want to hear that. And Courtney Upshaw had more personal fouls than sacks in his career.
That's true. So, no, I just mean in terms of what did Courtney Upshaw do really well? His run defense and his edge setting. And I think Odafe has shown that in college and with the Ravens that he can do that. And I think he has all the potential in the world to be a blue chipper. I'm going to not bet on him this year because I lost the last 2 years.
Okay. All right. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, what about others? Because I've got a couple others yet.
Yeah, please go for it.
Well, I mean, I'll start with Zay Flowers. I think he's probably the Ravens' best receiver, probably needs to be on the list. And he's the most important receiver by far because he's the one guy who can take the top off the defense, who can draw safety help. If I were looking at the things Beckham could do for this team, one of the big ones is to teach Flowers how to run better routes. Flowers, incredibly sudden athlete, but he doesn't throw wiggle at the defender at the top of the stem like you'd want a great route runner to do. And Beckham is one of the great route runners in the last decade in the NFL, and having him here should be a big difference. In fact, it's one of the things I really loved was seeing Beckham, Flowers, and Lamar all practicing together.
Oh, it was wonderful. And on the Lounge podcast, I know that they were talking to Zay and asking him about the workouts they were doing in Miami, him and Odell and Lamar. And they were like, oh, how does Odell work out? And he was like, he didn't really work out. He taught me stuff. And it was
great.
Exactly. Perfect. So right to your point, Odell, I think, is locked in to do that for Zay. I mean, my issue really, Ken, is that I think there's a difference between him having a fantastic rookie season, something that I haven't really seen before to the level for the Ravens,
Mm-hmm.
and being a blue chip player all year long, being a pro ball, can't miss, can't stop, fantasy darling. I think he has it in him. And the comparison, it's lofty, but I think that he has Antonio Brown in him. When I watch him, if he realizes all of his potential, I think it's Antonio Brown. If he doesn't realize all of his potential, I think he's better than Julian Edelman. I mean, he's just so sudden, always open.
So you're seeing
But
him as playing in the slot, really, as opposed to playing on the playing a Z, say.
I think that if we get the full complement of our receivers, Odell, and if we also get Bateman back,
Mm-hmm.
I think that naturally Zay would be the best at being in the slot with those two on the outside. I think Zay can absolutely, maybe when Odell leaves, move to the outside because he did it in college. I just think that he can build his game so much because he didn't even start playing receiver until his junior year of high school.
A lot of drawing that. I mean, you can draw safety attention from a vertical run from the slot as well. But I think that you have other options if he's at the Z spot, because you can motion him, you can do other things that would drive value, like we saw from Duvernay last year and in the last couple of years. But I would personally see him as being more of a Z guy. We'll see how this works out.
I love it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I love it. I hope you're right. And I think that I just kind of like Odafe, I'm a little exhausted at taking first round wide receivers from the Ravens and saying, you're going to be a pro baller this year. It's like, I'm going to just give him some time to blossom because I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be great.
Torrey Smith, great in his rookie year. So it's not unheard of. So we'll wait on this one. I think the pressure is going to be on Flowers tremendously. I think the targets will be there for him this year. I think basically I don't think he can miss there without he could be hurt obviously, but I don't think he can miss if he's healthy in terms of getting the proper number of targets.
And EDC doesn't get credit because I think Hollywood Brown was pretty good in his first year, especially having screws in his foot after a Liz Frank injury. I mean, I thought he had some great games and made some big plays.
Oh yeah, definitely impacted opposing defenses too.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about taking the top off the defense. Game 1 in Miami just went off. But talking about Liz Frank, if I can, I'd like to bring up Rashad Bateman. Get your thoughts on him.
Well, Bateman, if he was completely healthy, he'd certainly be the Ravens' best receiver. Mm-hmm. In my mind, he'd be the Ravens' best receiver.
I agree.
He's their only natural X, and he's the guy who is the best route runner on the team, maybe other than Beckham, but he certainly has the best separation capabilities at the top of the route because Beckham's not the speed player he once was. Same problem that all the receivers have, frankly, on the Ravens is hands. The Ravens have such a group. They've assembled a group where they obviously, it's like they didn't take any measurements or metrics or consider hands in any way in getting this group together. But Likely has a big problem dropping the ball. Andrews drops it some. Beckham's drops it 20 or 30% more than the league average.
Does he really? Beckham does with his 10-inch hands and all his one-handed warm-ups. He drops that much.
Look at his percentage drop rate for his career and compare it to the NFL drop rate, and you'll see Nelson Aguilar, one of the biggest droppers in recent years. Darius Slayton is a guy who drops it a little more, and Ravens fans wanted him too. So it's a group that has a lot of trouble holding on to the football, and I hope that doesn't become an ongoing disease. Marquise Brown obviously had a problem with it when he was here. It's something they probably should spend a little time on, trying to get better catching technique. Some of it's a hand placement. There's a lot of focus, and there's just got to be some receiving coaching going on that improves that. Because if you drop, let's say 4 percentage points more of catchable balls, that's going to significantly impact your catch rate and the quarterback's completion rate, and that's not not what you want.
Man, what a great point. I haven't thought about that, but coach him up, huh? That's why we hired Greg Lewis, all of his success in Kansas City. So there's cause for optimism. My biggest issue with Rashad, and I love Rashad, I think that Rashad has the ability to be our true number one, or at least I did. And the problem is the Liz Frank injury.
Yeah.
And it's not just players like Jimmy Smith, who's had every lower leg injury on planet Earth, and then 10 years later says, I still feel the Liz Frank. That could be arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
Liz Frank apparently, and I've talked to some buddies who are actually orthopedic surgeons. It's very, very hard to get that fixation right to make a full recovery. And to me, Rashad's superpower was his route running. So I really hope that he is the exception to the rule where he can realize all of his potential back, because if he does, he could be great.
Let's talk about that for a second. You say fixation, and by that you mean that the ligament of the bone has to be placed back properly and screwed in such that it heals in properly?
I think it's more about getting the perfect angle and getting the heel right. And again, not an expert, just trying to get some layman understanding as best as I could that that's really the difficult one. And that's why it's described as the hardest thing to return from. Now, he has his screws out, which is phenomenal. That's awesome. It's a great sign. It's better than Hollywood Brown when he had his Liz Frank injury. But recalling Hollywood Brown's sophomore season, he was like, man, I'm so much faster. I feel so much better. And so I just found out today Bateman's on the pup.
Yep.
And I think that that's appropriate. And I hope he has a second half of the season that we can all be proud of, where he recovers faster than any of us could expect in terms of realizing all of his explosive ability, because he's a great route runner to me.
So that would be 1 year exactly in terms of the recovery time. I've always heard I've heard a 1 year recovery or 11-month recovery, but then you also hear about it's still not right after that, and it can be longer. And I'm obviously it's a major concern to Bateman's career value that he's had this injury. But
yeah. So I've had, just from a personal experience, I've had orthopedic major surgery, and I remember they told me this is the expected timetable for you in terms of months where you'll return and you will be yourself again, at least 95%. And I remember hitting that mark and feeling like I'm 95% better, but I'm not 100%. And that last 5% felt like it was double the amount of time that was quoted to me, where I forgot I had the injury. I'm not thinking about it. I have no pain. If anything, I'm getting better, stronger, faster. And so I don't know if that's true of Liz Frank's, but it seems like by the second season, after ACLs, Liz Frank, some of these major surgeries, that in the second year, they can really go beyond that injury and not think about it anymore.
Right. All right. You have any other players for us that fit into this blue chip category for the 2023 Ravens?
I have maybes, just real quickly. Okay. I think Travis Jones is a maybe.
That's a good one.
I think he could explode like Broderick Washington. I felt like Roddy came out of nowhere and became a really great two-gap guy. Some of the film that's out there, you just see him throwing people. But I think that Travis Jones, when Michael Pierce said he's the strongest player he's ever played with, I mean, before he hyperextended his knee in the preseason, he was throwing grown men around, and he played decently with an injury all year.
If I can plug an old pod here, if you listen to the Brent Urban interview pod, by the way, fantastic stuff. Brent Urban was great, has great story personally, but he also has a great understanding of the game and can tell you about the other Ravens linemen in some ways. But one of the things he said was that, when he crosses the face of a guard and he wants to go into that, he can't really do the one arm is longer than two trick that I sometimes talk about, because his arms aren't strong enough to take it, or it's too much impact or whatever. So he has to go in with two arms at once and then change to one as soon as he's got him held off and has the proper seat. But he says the guy I've seen do one arm is Travis Jones, and so it's worthwhile listen just to hear that one comment. But Brent says a lot of other real cool stuff on the show.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm going to look for that this year and see if Travis Jones is throwing people just with one hand when he goes on a stunt, because him and Pierce is another guy. I mean, he's played 9 games in 3 years. Granted, one of those was a COVID sit out. Mm-hmm. When he's healthy, isn't he a top 10 nose tackle at minimum?
Oh, sure.
I mean, this guy is a phenomenal player. I just don't know that he's going to be healthy, poor guy. I mean, he keeps coming back. But if he's healthy, good Lord, and he's a force multiplier for the other two guys, Broderick and Travis Jones. So I think he might be a linchpin. If he's healthy, I think we're playoff bound in a big, big way.
Yeah, he's a huge player for the Ravens. In fact, if you're talking about the players you really want to stay healthy that aren't the obvious ones, he definitely would be one.
Yeah.
So you've got Travis Jones on your maybe list, and you've got Michael
Yeah.
Pierce on a he's kind of important list, but
Yeah.
you're not relying on him. It sounds like.
I'm not. And one guy that I'm not relying on, but I'm hopeful for, and I know would be a blue chip player at some point during the season. And I know he could be a guy that ends games for us in the playoffs if he were on our roster, and that's Justin Houston. Because I've heard you make this point many times in your podcast, and I agree. He was misused because everyone was injured last year, and maybe he got tired. I don't know. How old is he? 33, 34, 35? And he can still dominate in the fourth quarter. So I really hope we sign him back. I would love to have him coast him along.
I don't think that's going to happen. And it's not a matter of they
Yeah.
don't think Houston is good. It's a matter 9.5 sacks last year, but
Yep.
it's a matter of and he's 30. I'm sorry, was meant to look for his age. That's what I was looking for.
Thank you.
He was 33 last year, so he'll be 34. Is 34 as of January. So he's 34 and change now. But it's not a matter of that they don't think he would add something to the pass rush. It's probably not a good fit because they have not even the money. It's a matter of he's a rush linebacker, and they already got Ajabo, who they didn't have at the beginning of last year, and Owe, who they are going to play there all the time, and also Tavius Robinson are really all rush linebackers, and they need Sam guys now. That's why they're looking at Van Noy.
Right.
And the Bowser injury obviously is very serious for the team because they don't really have another Sam linebacker in house ready to go.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And unfortunately, I might not get what I want, but I totally believe in the team. And Van Noy, I'll take him. I mean, what a great pivot. And hopefully Bowser can come back because I think that he's kind of the linchpin.
Yeah, I agree. I think Van Noy for the whole season, wouldn't be what the Ravens would want. I don't think he would be Tyus Bowser, but if he could play, as it would turn out, what I'd really like him to play is about a third of the Sam snaps, and with Bowser playing 2/3 of them. But if it works out to be half and half because the injury and a slow ramp up and this and that, I'd be very happy with that at this point for Bowser. If he could somehow play half the snaps this year and not. When he might not be there for the opener, then I'd be very happy.
Yeah, I mean, one other guy that might interest you, Ken, is J.K. Dobbins.
Sure.
I don't know on him. I'm not betting high on him, and it's not because I don't think he has ability, and it's not because I don't think he's healthy. It's very common after an ACL tear to have something called arthropfibrosis, which is basically advanced scarring, which is, as we all know, he went against the team and got a scope, cleaned it up, and all of a sudden he got his range of motion back. I think his explosion will be there for sure this year because he's now had a whole off season, and usually that scope doesn't really make for a long recovery. But that's
the question I have for you.
Please.
Why is there any reason to believe, and he's starting on PUP this camp.
Yeah.
So is there any reason to believe that a scope done in the middle of last year when he played afterwards and clearly did not look like himself in terms of his finishing burst, in terms of his ability to finish some runs, that he should still be recovering from such a procedure now when he already played almost a year ago? Not almost a year ago, but a good portion of a year ago.
To me, I think it's unlikely that he's still recovering. I actually talked to a buddy specifically about this. Hey, you have arthropfibrosis, you got a scope, you have a whole off season. Is that going to delay your return to field and your performance? And he said, typically not. He could be injured, or the Ravens might say, hey, you're upset. You got injured last time. We'll just put you on PUP for a while and let you cool, let you hang out. Or maybe he is nursing something. I'm not sure, but it could be that they're just kind of doing gamesmanship with his ask for more money. But I don't know.
All right. Well, I hate speculating on that kind of thing, so I'm not going to. But okay. Is it possible also? Is it possible also that he had another scope procedure during the off season that he might be secondarily recovering from? Could he have had it cleaned a second time?
He could have had it cleaned a second time. I mean, if someone scars aggressively, they can scar again. But typically speaking, from a scope to clean up scar tissue where you see that someone all of a sudden is much, much better, he got much of his range of motion back. I think that limitation in his top speed was just that he had surgery. and he needed to have an offseason recover from it. If there's something else going on, he could have tweaked something new. I'm not sure. Maybe they're just being cautious with his recovery, like they are with Bateman, who had a Liz Frank, and they're saying, hey, that's a hard one. Let's kind of ease you back in. But again, that's speculation for sure.
All right, very good. Very good.
I think that JK is losing Greg Roman a little bit. Maybe he's going to lose some of those snaps with Lamar for the option, because he had blue chip ability in terms of his average yards per carry. I think it's top 10 ever. It's way above 5.
Right.
And so is he going to get that anymore? I don't know. Is he with the team next year? I don't know. So I'm not counting on him, but I would love to be wrong. And I'd love for him to get a huge bag at the end of the season, potentially not from the Ravens, because, he rushes for over 1,000 yards and has 400 yards in the air. I'd love it.
No, I'd love it too. And be happy to see him get it, because there's a lot of players right now who are in their 4th year or otherwise free agents will be leaving the Ravens at the end of this year, and the Ravens don't have the money to sign all of them. In fact, they probably don't have the money to sign many of them at all. And in particular, the ones who have big years, there's almost not enough money for that. So, you have Zeitler and Washington and Madubuike and Dobbins and who am I forgetting here? But
did you say Broderick?
Yeah, I already had Washington.
You said Broderick. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
But that's not all of them. There's a huge number of free agents that the Ravens are going to have go, and they can't pay them all. And so Kevin Zeitler, Patrick Queen is another. Kevin Zeitler wants a contract. Patrick Queen wants a contract. J.K. Dobbins wants a contract. And they have to have the same answer for all of them, pretty much. And yet they also need to probably try and get one of those 2 defensive linemen signed, because they've only got 1 defensive lineman for 2024. So going to be a really tough season. I don't think it's going to be received well. If Madubuike is left out, Washington gets a deal because he's the cheaper of the 2 and is right priced. And then Madubuike is going to be upset, and all the other 4th year players at other positions are going to be upset. And it could get ugly.
Well, I think they should talk to their agents and look at the league, because to me, they all cheered on Lamar to get a huge bag, and we have a salary cap. And when he takes X percentage of the cap, Sarah Ellison has a great point about percentage of cap and likelihood for Super Bowls. And Patrick Mahomes was the highest cap percentage last year in terms of winning a Super Bowl, because he just took so much money. So Lamar Jackson took money from other players, and he deserves it. That was the market. But it means a lot of guys are going to be unhappy. And I totally agree. I think Broderick Washington over Madubuike, because he's going to probably be right player, right price, unfortunately. I hope Madubuike plays too good this year to be able to be signed, because it's going to be pricey.
Right. And if he does, that's good for him. If Justin Madubuike gets a big contract somewhere else, that's fantastic.
I think that we might be able to sign JK, and I'll tell you why. He's got injuries, so that's going to count against him. And if you look at the market, how many big-time running backs who are healthy are going to be free agents next year that he's competing with? And so it might be a scenario where the Ravens say, we love you. This is what you're worth to us. Go try and get it. And if he doesn't, please come back and we'll pay you and we'll play you.
That's the Ozzie Newsome method. That's, go test the market here. In fact, we'll give you a support offer here at this lower level. And then we'll talk in 2 months if if it doesn't work out for you.
Yeah. I got one more speculative 2 seconds for you. Keaton Mitchell, long shot, but punt returner, kick returner. If you're willing to indulge that as something, I think that he's got the profile, he's got the speed, the leverage instincts, that maybe we throw him in a punt returner and he starts bringing back a few touchdowns this year, or at least in the postseason. I think he's a long shot to make the team, but watching his tape, it's the closest thing to watching Lamar to me, where it's just someone who's so fast and so athletic and can just move around, get him in open space, put him on special teams. Harbaugh loves it. So maybe he's a dark horse to be on the blue chip performers.
You had a couple guys on your list that in the materials you sent me that you didn't name. Justin Madubuike, Tyler Linderbaum, they're maybes also.
Absolutely. I mean, Justin Madubuike, he's coming into that 4th year. He can penetrate. He can get sacks. Campbell's gone. He's going to get more opportunities. I hope he gets 7 to 8 sacks. But I don't know. I think I again have fatigue on that guy. Where I drank the Kool-Aid from Peter King a couple of years ago when he did this obligatory, hey, second-year defender on the Ravens, who's going to be defensive player of the year? And I went, Matabike, yeah, of course, he's got everything I want. But he might be Kruger this year, that explodes for double the sacks that he normally gets. I hope he does. I really do. What about you? Do you think Matabike is going to have a big season this year?
I think it's a usage issue. I think actually they can fix. There's some addition by subtraction they can do with Matabike that is potentially very positive. So he's at 59% of snaps last year. I think if he dropped into the high 40s, that would be good. And the Ravens have multiple ways to get there, but they also are going to have more total defensive snaps to share. So percentage doesn't do it alone. Of course, it's number of snaps. And he could, I think, anyway. Basically, at the baseline of this are two things. If he can play mostly pass rush snaps, that's going to benefit him. And the second thing is, for him to play mostly pass rush snaps, somebody else has to play early down 3-tech, and I believe that's Travis Jones in a 1-3 matchup with Pierce.
Yeah, and just kind of thought experimenting to piggyback your point. If he is going against guards and centers, and if Ojabo's as good as we think, and if Odafe's as good as you think, screaming around the edges, where's the quarterback in the slide? Right into Matabike. So he's got, if he gets the opportunity, I think it's there.
Yeah, we'll see where on third down how they align, even, because one of the things they can do is get most of their defensive linemen off the field to control the snap counts there, which is it's a high fatigue position. And it's one where they really ought to try and manage snaps very carefully, and they do. The Ravens are a rotational team, but losing Calais Campbell is just enormous in terms of having a guy who is a bulwark in terms of playing a lot of snaps.
Yeah, I was really sad to see him go. Yeah. He's so good.
So you have Tyler Linderbaum on your list, but you don't have Kevin Zeitler on your list. Where's your reasoning there?
Zeitler's had 10, 11 years to see if he can be a blue chip player. And I don't know that he has. I don't have access to PFF, but when I watch, I don't go, that guy's just dominant. And when I watch Tyler Linderbaum in terms of raw potential and what you were talking about with first contract guys, he's a great run blocker. Can he go from mediocre pass blocker to something average? And he's got one of the best position coaches to do it and the will to do it, and that's Joe D. So if he can be average, I think he's a blue chip player. But the other question is, I've seen him in Roman's offense. I don't know what he does in Monken's offense. If we're just throwing the ball around, does he become a liability? So I'm not sure. And Zeitler, I don't want to bet on.
Okay, well, fair enough. Zeitler, I think, is one of the narrowest bands of where I would expect his season to be of any Ravens player. I think he's a North Star in terms of your ability to guess what exactly he would do. He scored absolutely identically to Ben Powers last year, which means he had a great year in terms of what he did for the whole year in my system. And both he and Powers had the right direction complements, meaning they're better pass blockers than they are run blockers, which is it's what you want at any offensive line position, but you especially want that you especially want to tackle, but you really want to guard too, and you still want it at center, even though there are people who tell you it's less important at center. Linderbaum's case, I think the uphill battle for him this year will be twofold. One is more pass snaps liability, like you mentioned. The other one is new left guard who isn't going to be a good pass blocker, isn't going to be as good a pass blocker as Powers. So those are my two fears about him coming in.
Great point. Absolutely. Broderick Washington, we haven't really talked about. He made a huge jump last year. I think he might have maxed out on his jump. And for me, as good as I think he played last year, I don't know that he's a blue chip player.
I would agree.
And I say that with respect, Broderick Washington. I think you're amazing. In case you ever listen to the podcast, and then Patrick Ricard, I think that if we use him as fullback, he's exceptional. You just watch clips of him annihilating people as a blocker. But does he really have a role in Monken's offense where apparently, according to Jones, that ex-Green Bay receivers talking about how Monken's going to go back to Louisville and he's going to spread everyone out and we're going to have 4 receivers. I don't know that we have a full.
So Ricard will be one of our slot guys. That's okay.
Running out to the flat.
Yeah, there you go.
Stretching every blade of grass. And then Isaiah Likely, another guy who just showed great promise, led the team in terms of highest amount of yards for a rookie tight end last year. But can he be a blue chip? Unfortunately, I don't even want to say it, but it would be unfortunate for him to realize his blue chip potential this year.
Because it might be injury related.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I would never wish that on Andrews because I love Andrews. And I think that he's our number one option. I think that he's going to get the target share.
And there is another possibility. Likely could become a much bigger part of the offense with injuries at wide receiver too.
Oh yeah,
and the Ravens at wide receiver are not. I mean, they're already walking wounded in a lot of ways with Odell coming back from an injury, Duvernay coming back from an injury, although he apparently looks fine, and Bateman coming to camp on PUP. I mean, that's a pretty severe hit. Aguilar has been a durable player in his career, but never a guy that you could really trust with a big target share. So I don't think that's going to be the way of it as it turns out. So Ravens got some questions.
So we go into the first 6 weeks of the season, and do we line up at wide receiver our healthy bodies, which is a rookie in Zay Flowers, respect. Odell Beckham, maybe. Nelson Aguilar is healthy. Okay. Or do you throw in what Monken likes with what he did in Georgia with a 2 tight end set,
12.
or maybe even 3 tight ends, throw those big bodies. You can just steal it right from Roman's offense from last year, because apparently Kohler put on 10, 20 pounds of muscle. So let him go until they can come back and relieve the troops with some healthy bodies. Yeah,
and we'll see if the offense wants to change back at that point, I guess. But it's definitely that's a very real possibility that as much as they look at this wide receiver, and Monken talks about playing 4 wide, and you can play 4 wide obviously with 2 tight ends, but he talks about playing 4 wide, that it really ends up being a 12 offense, because that's where the talent is. I mean, you got 3 tight ends as good as the Ravens have, and you want to play 1 per play. That would be just a dire waste of talent to make that happen. So hopefully the Ravens will see more 12.
But could you imagine that 12 being a spread option with as good as a blocker as Isaiah Likely became, and as good as a blocker as Mark Andrews came, where you just run hurry up and you could switch between run looks that are heavy and pass options where you can't cover them? I mean, that would be incredible. Yeah, no, one of the things about playing hurry up with that is those same players have to stay on the field for hurry up. You can't make any offensive substitutions. So you're kind of limited in the number of 9 routes you want to run with that kind of an offense. So, some of your ability even to take the top off a defense with Zay Flowers is limited because of what you've done. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. Yeah. But David, I've really appreciated having this conversation with you. There's no easy place. You're not really on Twitter, right? For us to give you a place to talk football with you, right? No, not right now. I try and keep that limited, try and stay a fan, but I'm always happy to kind of reach out to you, Ken. Absolutely.
All right, absolutely. We'll have you back on sometime, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on some of the injuries as they occur this year, and hopefully there won't be a lot to talk about, but there always is going to be something. And,
knock on wood. The team took care of that, hopefully, by rearranging some of their strength and conditioning people, because I listened to Derek Wolf's podcast on Joe Rogan, and that was concerning, especially with the grades that the team gave their strength and conditioning team. So anyway, sorry, Ken. Go ahead.
Not a high net promoter score there internally on the Ravens from the Ravens players.
Right.
All right, David, thanks again. Other folks out there, if you'd like to come on a Film Study short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter or X or whatever the next platform might be. Please hit me up, and I'll, as long as DMs are allowed, and I'll try and get back to you right away. There is still some options to get in either before the season or during the regular season with a show. Have a lot of content already in the bag, ready to go, and we'll be starting with our daily camp reports. We're doing this on the 25th, but the 26th, I'll be out there at camp for the first day, and we'll have a camp report every day I'm there, and looking forward to that. David, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you, Ken. It was my pleasure. Really fun.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.